A shocking betrayal, a near-impossible escape, and a mysterious horse changed everything. She was on the cusp of success, until she was pushed to the brink. But an unexpected act of rescue took her story in a direction no one could have predicted. Before diving into this journey of suspense and overcoming, subscribe to the channel now and leave your like so you don't miss any details of what comes next. The city of Nova Aurora never rests. Its illuminated buildings rise like giants of concrete and glass, reflecting the intensity of a routine that never stops. Amidst this fast-paced scenario, Leticia Antunes, at 35 years old, was living the life she had always dreamed of. She was leading a renowned consulting firm, admired for her intelligence, strategy, and natural leadership skills. No one could have imagined that, behind her confident smile and high-level meetings, there was a blind faith placed in Federico, her partner and best friend. This man, whom she trusted to share her achievements and fears, seemed to be the perfect business partner. He had the same drive, the same desire for success, and together they had built one of the largest firms in the market. Their conversations went beyond the professional sphere. They were long-term plans, laughter during breaks, and the complicity of siblings. However, a hidden truth was creeping behind the scenes, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. Leticia vividly remembers the day her confidence crumbled. A decisive meeting with investors was scheduled for late afternoon. Everything was going well until, on the way to the office, a subtle change in Federico's expression awakened an uncomfortable premonition. Something felt wrong, almost imperceptible, but tension cut through the air. On a narrow curve on a busy avenue, the car skidded suddenly. Maybe it was a mechanical failure or something darker. Suddenly the world went dark for Leticia. All he felt was the devastating impact, the sound of metal twisting, the shattering of glass, and the confusion that followed. When she regained consciousness, she was injured, her body immobilized by pain and fractures. Federico, however, acted distantly. He tried to remain calm, but there was something icy in his gaze that Leticia couldn't decipher. He pulled her out of the car, but she could barely make out what was going on around her. When the authorities showed up, Federico presented a version of the incident that, at that moment, sounded coherent to everyone. A lapse, a small mistake, something that could be overlooked. But slowly, Leticia began to see the inconsistencies in his speech. Amid so many contradictory clues, she understood that it had not been simply bad luck at the wheel. Federico was involved in something much more perverse than she could have imagined. It was not about saving her. His goal was to get rid of her and maintain absolute power over the company. Now confined to a wheelchair, Leticia was putting together the pieces of a puzzle she had never imagined existed. Her body did not obey her, but her mind remained sharp, examining every action, every word Federico said, every decision he made. He had manipulated the facts so that the blame would fall on her, who was paying the price in her own flesh, without any trace of remorse on his part. Frustration tore Leticia apart inside. Although she felt all the manipulation, she realized that Federico remained unpunished while she faced the battle of getting back on her feet physically and emotionally. It was impossible to accept that this man, considered so trustworthy, had done something so cruel. It was not just the trauma of an accident, but the realization that the bonds she thought were indestructible never really existed. He had toyed with what she had most precious, her dream of success and the unshakable faith she had placed in him. Leticia, destroyed inside, refused to give up. Every cell in her body yearned for revenge, but the fire burning in her chest was, above all, the flame of someone who did not know the meaning of giving up. Months later, in a hospital room filled with the sterilized smell of the corridors and the rhythmic sound of the machines, Leticia tried to recover. The scratches, cuts, and fractures were visible, but her soul had been affected in a much deeper way. Her distrust of Federico consumed her. What was supposed to be the realization of a brilliant future became a nightmare of overwhelming proportions. The company built alongside him, piece by piece, began to crumble under a flood of manipulations that emerged from behind the scenes. During one of her sleepless nights, Leticia, Still weakened, examined some documents and found something that gave her chills. A suspicious letter addressed directly to Federico, outlining step by step how to destroy his reputation. A merciless plan, proving that the accident had not been enough to satisfy his cruel plans. At that moment, Leticia understood that the fight for physical survival was only the first step in a war against a manipulative mind. When Federico invited her to dinner in a secluded place, Leticia agreed, overcome with the fury of someone demanding answers. In that silent environment, with the shadows of the trees cast by the dim lights, she found herself face to face with the enemy she had previously called friend. The exchange of glances was cutting. "Did you really believe you wouldn't find out?" Leticia asked, her hands shaking with anger but her voice still firm. Federico smiled, although there was no sign of joy in his expression. It was the smile of someone who wields power. "I knew you would find out, but it's too late. The damage has been done." His words sounded like a blow. There was no regret or hesitation, only pleasure in reinforcing his superiority and the certainty that Leticia could do nothing to defend herself. The moment seemed suspended in the air. Her breathing was heavy and fear threatened to paralyze her. She refused to lower her head. In an outburst, Leticia confronted him, revealing all her indignation and will to fight. "You can try to destroy me, but I will go until the end." Federico's face became distraught. He could not tolerate being confronted, especially by someone he thought had already left him with no way out. With quick and aggressive gestures, he pushed Leticia, who fell to the ground, feeling the old, sharp pain reverberate in her body. His hatred, fueled by his thirst for power, overflowed. In a matter of seconds, Federico dragged her to the edge of a rushing river, where the sound of the water seemed to be the only witness to his cruelty. Violently, he threw her against the current. Feeling her muscles fail, Leticia sank, unable to fight against the rough water and her own physical limitations. The icy shock of entering the river took her breath away. The world was disappearing before him. In the final moments of consciousness, the despair of disloyalty and abandonment was greater than the fear of dying. At the height of her terror, everything became an anguishing void. She had been left to her own devices, immersed in the feeling of having been simply discarded by someone she had blindly trusted. As she felt herself being swallowed up by the force of the river, the echo of betrayal reverberated in her mind. Who could save her now? She was completely alone. The water ran mercilessly, and the cold of the night intensified the horror of her situation. There were no signs of help or traces of compassion, only the fury of the waters. Federico's impassive face was the last image Leticia had before the remaining lights of the street lamps in the distance faded. Even without hope, something inside her screamed silently, wanting to survive. Fear mixed with anger, and the weakness of her body contradicted the determination that insisted on beating. And then, at the moment when everything seemed to dissipate into the icy darkness, a presence appeared. An unexpected movement broke the waters with the subtlety of a miracle. When Leticia, clouded by consciousness, raised her eyes slightly, she came across a magnificent horse taking its chances on the rocks on the shore. It approached without hesitation, as if guided by an ancestral instinct. The animal, named Astro, as I would later discover, moved with the tension of someone who also knew pain. Without fuss, Astro braced his body against the current, allowing Leticia to cling to his muscular neck and escape the whirlpool that was pulling her to the bottom. Leticia's strength was almost non-existent. Adrenaline, however, provided the last push she needed to keep going. Astro, with an almost human spirit, moved carefully to the rocks, helping her reach the bank. And there, in the cold of the night, she finally gave in to exhaustion, fainting next to the animal that had just saved her from a cruel fate. A silent and improbable rescue, witnessed only by the distant stars. When she regained consciousness, she was already surrounded by curious onlookers and cell phones that recorded every second. The video of her fight for her life and of the horse that pulled her out of the river went viral within hours. with the images spreading across social media. Leticia's fall and Astro's unexpected help touched the hearts of thousands of people, but for her, everything still seemed confusing. The pain, physical and emotional, throbbed, and her mind pulsed with unanswered questions. Astro, on the other hand, was not just an ordinary horse, marked by old scars. He had also been the victim of a cruel fate. From the marks on his back, it was clear that someone had used him until his essence was broken and then discarded him. Leticia, still recovering from the shock, could barely assimilate the enormity of what had happened. If before she had believed she was alone in her own pain, now she realized that there was an unexpected companion by her side who, in his own way, also needed help. The next morning, now more stable, she got up from her hospital bed with a decision. She would not abandon Astro, just as he had not abandoned her. That strange bond that had emerged in the darkness of the river was beginning to grow stronger. While researching, Leticia discovered Astro's past. He had been a champion in equine therapy sessions, helping countless children and adults with special needs. His gift for connecting with people was unique. But exploited and exhausted, he ended up abandoned in a clandestine stable. His scars told stories of mistreatment, and his gaze, although tired, still held a spark of hope. Understanding this past awakened in Leticia a sense of responsibility that she had not felt since before the accident. If Astro had been willing to save her, she would repay him in kind. As the days passed, their bond grew stronger. Leticia sensed that, just like her, Astro knew the pain of being betrayed, used and discarded. Together, they found a kind of common purpose, which did not simply involve surviving, but also dreaming again. As she was being discharged from the hospital, she was already outlining her next steps. They would build a safe space, a refuge for him and other animals forgotten by the system. Her personal healing project now expanded beyond the desire to walk again. It became the desire to build a shelter for creatures that, like her, were targets of human neglect and cruelty. Although the video of her rescue had gone around the world, Leticia did not let herself be carried away by the passing fame. She was fully aware that while Astro, if he stayed by her side, they would both be the target of curiosity. But she also knew that the rehabilitation journey for a horse so marked by trauma would not be easy. The trust he demonstrated was sometimes replaced by tremors and fear, especially when any noise reminded him of his painful past. For Leticia, that was a reflection of her own fragility. And in a way, helping him was helping her too. That was how she decided to found what would come to be called Rancho Aurora, a place where Astro and other animals could go. There, she intended to offer shelter and care, far from the abuse that marked many stories. It wasn't long before the first threats arrived. People who profited from the unrestricted and inhumane use of animals began to turn against Leticia, spreading lies and sabotaging her work. It seemed impossible to keep the project going while facing an invisible enemy, determined to destroy everything she had built. In the midst of all this, Federico re-emerged as a shadowy figure. He, who had disappeared after throwing her into the river, refused to see her growth and visibility. Unable to tolerate the fact that Leticia had survived and, more than that, prospered, he devised plans to bring her down. At Rancho Aurora, while feeding Astro at the beginning of a cold night, Leticia received an anonymous pamphlet with insults and slander about her. Cold sweat ran down the back of her neck. She recognized Federico's fingerprints on those unfounded accusations. Instead of backing down, she felt her anger give way to a solid determination. She would never allow manipulation to rule her life again. If Federico had the money, she had a just cause and the growing support of people who sympathized with Astro's story. The sabotage escalated, attempts to invade the ranch, destroy fences, scare the animals. But Leticia resisted, repairing the damage with the help of allies who appeared every day. She no longer saw herself as a victim. Now she was the woman who protected those who could not defend themselves. Federico had not counted on this new Leticia, renewed in pain, but unbreakable in her will to fight. One rainy morning, the ranch was the target of a deliberate fire. Within seconds, the flames licked the stables while the wind whistled sinisterly. Astro, terrified, neighed amidst flames and sparks. The heat was oppressive, the air impossible to breathe. Leticia, with tears in her eyes, did not hesitate. She ran into the fire, determined to save whoever was there. In that whirlwind, she saw Frederico's face appear among the flames, accompanied by henchmen determined to end everything. Amidst the panic, Leticia organized a team of volunteers to clear the way. With her hands burning in the infernal heat, she freed Astro, guiding him outside with the other animals. The confrontation reached its climax, with Frederico appearing to defeat her once and for all. But upon seeing Leticia's determined look, she realized too late that she was not the same defenseless woman. She shouted, "Not today, Frederico, not while I breathe." And then the clash became inevitable. The fire almost completely consumed the ranch. But not Leticia's hopes. She and Astro emerged injured but alive. In the press, news of an arson attack reinforced support for her cause. While Frederico walked away, fearing being caught, Leticia saw the destruction as an opportunity for a new beginning. If he wanted to destroy her, she would use her fall as her strength, rising stronger. Astro, even burned and exhausted, demonstrated something extraordinary in the midst of the wreckage. He pulled out scraps of wood with his snout to make way for the other horses. His act of bravery moved everyone and came to symbolize the rebirth that Leticia so strongly defended. In the following days, Frederico's downfall was as resounding as his rise had been. His frauds and schemes were exposed, and he ended up alone with no allies to cover for him. Leticia, for her part, saw everything with a mixture of relief and emptiness. There was no triumph in seeing someone sink, only the feeling that justice was taking its course. She took back Rancho Aurora, rebuilding what the fire had consumed. Now, the place had become a symbol of resistance and new beginnings, welcoming not only injured animals, but also people seeking to overcome trauma. Each plant that sprouted, each fence that was rebuilt, each shelter that was renovated, was like a step away from the darkness that had enveloped her. In the end, what really prevailed was not the loss of a stable or the unmasking of a villain, but rather Leticia's strength in transmuting adversity into courage, pain into learning, fear into action. She now lived far from the empty spotlight, but close to what really mattered. The dignity she had found in protecting those who had no voice. Astro, recovered, and with an irrepressible sparkle in his eyes, was living proof that, even after the deepest darkness, a spark of hope can always be lit. Time passed, and that place that had risen from the ashes became a true Aurora sanctuary, where pain was not swept under the rug, but treated with sensitivity and understanding. Leticia observed each victory, no matter how small, of the animals that arrived weakened, without any prospects. She saw herself reflected in them. Just like her, many just needed a chance. With the help of dedicated professionals, the space became a reference in equine therapy, even receiving former patients who came there to give back a little of what they had received. Frederico, however, did not disappear without a trace. Even without power and reputation, he still caused Leticia discomfort. An unexpected visit from one of his former associates left her apprehensive. Could he still be up to something, even though he was demoralized? Instead of being intimidated, Leticia reinforced the sanctuary, sought alliances with animal rights groups, and increased the number of volunteers. If Frederico were to resurface, she would find an army ready to defend her. In any case, the great battle that Leticia overcame daily was not against a manipulative man, but against the very ghosts that had frightened her for so long. Each step she took towards recovering her body and her confidence was a personal achievement that no fire could destroy. After many storms, Leticia reached a new phase in her life. The past, although full of wounds, was no longer a burden, but a reminder of everything he had learned. He could feel the gentle breeze on his face as he walked through the spaces where, long ago, he had seen fire and panic. He could watch Astro trotting across the field, a horse that overcame every pain with untouchable nobility. When melancholy threatened to return, she remembered the reason she continued: to inspire others to believe that life, no matter how uncertain it may seem, can be rewritten. What was once the product of tears and sacrifices was now a source of strength and faith in the future. In the midst of this rebirth, Leticia discovered something valuable. Defeating Frederico and rebuilding the ranch were never the most important victory. The real achievement came when she understood that salvation lies in the meaning we attribute to our battles. At the end of it all, she realized that her trophy was not the downfall of her adversary, but the discovery of a purpose that would sustain her when all seemed lost. In a final video posted on her channel, she shared this lesson with the public. True strength comes when we decide to move forward, even if we lack everything except courage. And she invited each person to reflect on their own stories, encouraging them to share insights in the comments. Thus, the script ends with a message of reflection and challenge. Leticia looks at the camera with her voice full of genuine emotion. Now that you've seen everything I've been through and how I found my motivation in the most painful moments, tell me in the comments, which part of this journey speaks to you the most? If this story touched your heart, share the video so that more people can find hope, even if it's just a thin thread. Join us, subscribe, turn on notifications, and help spread the courage of those who do not give up. We are united in this search for rebirth and overcoming. Thank you for being here. With these words, the screen goes dark, leaving the audience with the choice of just watching or starting to rebuild their own strengths.